So my name's Karen Conway. I'm one of the SMEs for finance working on the Delivery Associates programme. My background is I'm an accountant and I've worked in finance for probably over 20 years and worked in government, worked in lots of projects. So a wealth of experience of working across business cases and programme finance. I'll just let Fiona introduce herself, my co-presenter today.
Hi, I'm Fiona, also one of the finance SMEs on the DAN network and have experience writing, but also quality reviewing business cases, including quite a large number of infrastructure cases and then programme finance as well.
Brilliant, thank you. If we go to the next slide.
And just kind of, we've got Bill on the call as well, who might want to introduce himself.
Oh, is he on the call?
Yes.
Hi, yep.
Sorry, Bill.
That's all right. So Bill Beattie working with Fiona and Karen. I'm the SME that looks after land, housing and regeneration. As you can imagine, many of those schemes have got business cases as well. So again, I'll just try and bring a sort of another perspective to the sort of views that Fiona and Karen will share with you today.
Brilliant, thank you, Bill. Sorry, I hadn't realised you were on the call. So brilliant. So we just moved to the agenda. So today we're going to do a quick recap around the context of the financial and economic cases within the Green Book business case. And then we're going to delve into a bit more information and look at good practice and common pitfalls. And then talk a bit about project adjustment requests and PARs. We'll probably be talking for sort of, 25-30 minutes, and then to allow plenty of time at the end for you all to ask questions, because I think that, when you've got us on the call, if you want to ask some specifics, I think that's where we get some of the richness of asking the questions, and myself, Fiona and Bill will be on hand to answer as many of those questions as we can. Happy as well if people do want to ask questions as we're going through. So if you pop your hand up, if you do want to ask a question, if it's a point in time when we're doing it rather than waiting to the end, happy for people to do that as well. Brilliant. Is everybody okay with that? And everybody's at the right webinar. Nobody's going to drop off because they thought they were doing something else. Brilliant. Thank you. So we go to the next slide. So there's an assumption, we've made a bit of an assumption that people are familiar with the Green Book business cases and the 5-case model. Just on the slide there, we're just sort of showing obviously the 5 cases there: strategic case, economic case, financial case, commercial case, and management case. Like I said, today we're going to focus really on the finance and the economic case, but really just sort of remembering that all the cases flow, and you can't write one in isolation. And when you are thinking about the strategic case and the finance case, thinking about how it does flow through and what you're writing about is reflected within the financial aspect. So really interlinked, but today we're just going to focus, like I say, on the financial and the economic case. We move to, sorry. So we're going to focus initially on the economic case, and then we'll move on to the finance case. So really, again, just a brief sort of overview of the economic case. Really, it's there to think about the net societal impact of the project or the programme, to say what's the impact based on sort of what you're trying to change compared to business as usual, and really being able to understand what are the risks there, what are the costs, and how that impact goes. Obviously, and benefits are really key when writing any business case. So really thinking about the monetizable benefits, and also what's really important in the economic case is about the wider non-monetizable benefits, and also thinking about the wider societal impacts, because obviously the knock-on impacts of many business cases have bigger impacts than the initial sort of monetized benefits. One thing also to think about is obviously the different stages of a business case. So when you're doing the strategic outline case, it will be very different to when you actually get to the full business case. And again, there just on the screen is just a bit of a reminder. the strategic outline case or the SOC, it's about talking, it's very high level, thinking about what your long list of options are, how you start narrowing that down into the short list. This is also at a point where it's pre-procurement. So again, this will be before you've made any decisions around your procurement. Moving then on to the outline business case where you've refined the options, you've got the agreed shortlist, you're really then thinking about what the impacts of those are and gathering that further in-depth information. Again, at that stage, again, it is pre-procurement. And then when you get to the stage of the full business case, you've got that, the option that you're going for, you've got the value for money. And at that stage, it's probably at the point where you'll be post the procurement phase, but at pre-award. So having that full business case sign off to say, yes, we're ready to go ahead. And let's get things signed off and go ahead with the procurement. Oops, next slide, Fiona, sorry, please. Again, as part of the economic case, is talking about critical success factors and when you're looking at the long and short list. So this slide is really just sort of representing the different stages and what you would do there, thinking about your range of critical success factors and what they mean, the different sort of areas there around your scope, your service solution, service delivery, implementation, funding, thinking about what of those things need to be true when you're assessing your options. So for example, if it's a service delivery solution that you maybe want something that's, I don't know, for example, a self-serve solution, one of your critical success factors is we need to be able to have users need to be able to do self-serve. Actually, if one of your solutions is, it's not, that ability is not there, then obviously you might then say, do you know what, that's not meeting our critical success factor. So you would discount that option. So as you're going through that, you would look at the options and assess them where you've got your green, amber and red to say, do they meet the critical success factors? Yes, great, we'll take that forward. No, they don't. We wouldn't do that one. Or maybe it's amber and maybe it's something about we need to do a bit more work to have a look at this to see if it is right or not. And it maybe meets some of the critical success factors and maybe not others. So it's sort of going through that process as you're going along to try and then come down from your long list to your short list. And then usually when you get to sort of the shortlist stage, you've got your business as usual and the counterfactual, you've got something that's probably do minimal, your preferred way forward, and then you might have some other options or variants on the preferred way forward. We sometimes see with projects that potentially if they're longer term, there might be sort of different options about delivery. So it could be that although you've got your preferred way forward, you might have some other options that sort of come through. But it is really key about having really clear critical success factors that really take into consider the objectives. They're linking through to the strategic case. They're really reflecting of what your case for change is, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to deliver, and that you can really understand that to then come up with your shortlist that you can then sort of then work out what the value there and to represent the best value for money for the organisation. We move on to the next slide. So again, just sort of thinking about some of the common pitfalls there when we're doing sort of critical success factors and thinking about the long list and short list. I've found, and when I've worked with people working on projects, sometimes there's a predetermined, we know how we're going to do this, and actually making sure that you don't sort of go into it knowing this, right, in my business case, this is how we're going to do this. And it is really key to then have that, have a session with, stakeholders to really think about, have we thought about all the options? Have we thought even at the ones that may be a bit sort of out there and a bit more sort of, difficult to do and really thought outside the box? It may be that you do come back to maybe delivering it the way you thought you might do, but actually it's that sort of that real assessment. And quite often it's helpful to have some sort of critical friend review to come in and to be able to say, actually, have we thought about all the options, and sometimes getting somebody from outside of the program or the project to go, why would you not do it that way? Have you not thought about doing this? Because quite often, I have seen business cases that, they've been shoehorned in to meeting the end answer. And I'm sure we all have seen that. But actually just really having that thinking about how do we really make sure that we're doing the right thing, and actually we've exhausted all the different options. Second one there we've got on there is around including the counterfactual. Again, I think sometimes that there is people that sort of move away from including sort of a counterfactual and sort of the do nothing option. Again, it's really important to understand what exactly, if you kept things and you didn't do anything, what that impact would be. Sometimes doing something, obviously from an investment point of view costs more money, but actually some of the wider benefits and the wider impacts, it is still a really good thing to do it. Something we're seeing quite a lot at the moment, some of the clients that we're working with, is around, technological change, that, because things come to the end of the shelf life and stuff, and they have to do something, but actually sort of sitting there and doing nothing is not sort of the right thing to do. So it's really clear of understanding your counterfactual and really being able to document that and what that means. Again, I think we've already talked a bit about the CSFs and aligning them to the strategic case, but again, that should be that golden thread that goes through from each of the cases to really sort of understand how they align. So what you've written in your strategic case in terms of your strategical success factors, what the case for changes, that links through in all of your cases. So it's really, really important. And also, sometimes what happens is different authors write different cases. So you may have maybe some finance professionals writing the economic and finance case. You might have a strategist doing the strategy case, and etc. But actually, it's really key to make sure you've got somebody that's actually sort of making that connection and making sure that everything does run through them, and it does make a lot of sense. So it is really important to have that coherent business case. And then the fourth one on there is really around benefits. Again, it's really important to make sure that you've really considered all of the benefits and thinking about cashable and non-cashable, and also thinking around the different sort of benefit categories, making sure that you've got those all included. Disbenefits is something that people do include and sometimes don't include, and thinking about, actually it may be that there is an additional cost from doing something. Maybe there is a net impact on something, but actually it is the right thing to do. So and it's something that needs to be done. One thing that sometimes happens around is thinking about ongoing costs and ongoing change and impact on benefits, not just of the immediate change and what's happening now, but what that means in terms of future costs. And sometimes that can get missed from the business case, and therefore the impact on the benefits. So again, it's really sort of thinking about that wider picture, that whole picture. And also, as I sort of talked about previously, thinking about some of that wider societal impacts when you're writing business cases, and really sort of understanding that value, a value along the way. So really key to making sure you've got all of those things included. We move to the next slide. I'm just going to now touch around sort of uncertainty and risk, and just sort of touching on optimism, bias, contingency, and sensitivity. I think it's an interesting one, because I think some of these get intertwined and they get sort of talked about as one thing, and they are all very different and all there for a different reason. And that they will change over time as you're going through the business cases. So when you're going through your SOC through to your FBC, these should change and be reflected as you go through. Optimism bias, is something that's probably going to be, we would expect it to be higher at the start. So in your SOC, because you're at that point where you're still at that sort of really high level, you're at the strategic outline case. You've got maybe an idea, but you haven't worked through all the costs yet. Therefore, you don't know, you haven't gone out yet and done market testing on your procurement. You're not sort of sure. So again, you might include some optimism bias on your costs and on your benefits, just to sort of give you that sort of buffer. as you're going through that process. But we would expect then to see optimism bias reducing as you're going through. So when you get to an FBC, if you're then ready to do your procurement, you should have a more clearer idea of the certainty around the costs. So therefore, at that point, you would expect OB to be less. There may still be some there because you might sort of include a small amount, but we would expect it to be less by that stage. Contingency is more around those things that the sort of risks that you can't control and that you're not able to always put a quantify. So again, it's sort of allowing for those things that could be around things like the economic, macroeconomic impacts. It might be something around availability of suppliers and things like that. So things that that you might be able to look into, but then you might so it's more not around the value of costs, but actually things that you might not be able to control and the risks there. And then the third one there is around sensitivity. And again, it's really good to sort of include some sensitivity in the business case to think about. It could be around if it's for a service. So it might be, I know we've been talking to people that build, that might be building like leisure centres or thinking about swimming pools, or, you might have sensitivity around sort of the number of people that might use the facility, or to sort of you'd have your central case that would say, we were expecting 100,000 people to visit that leisure centre every week. You might do sensitivity to say, actually, what would the cost be if 150 people came, or actually if only 50 people came? So you could do that sensitivity. And again, it helps you look at the robustness of the business case to really understand and the impact then on the net present value to understand what that does, and also to then see at what point the break even happens and at what point potentially that the project might be deemed to be unviable. And again, some of those things can be controlled and some of those things are less easy to control. Another thing we're seeing a bit more nowadays, and I know HMG are sort of pushing forward around, is reference class forecasting. And again, it's really interesting when you're working on projects to think about, are you delivering something that's been potentially done before, something similar? So reference class forecasting is sort of taking information we've had in the past. So it could be stuff around delivery, so it could be around delivery timescales, it could be around sort of how the cost profiles work, and what we've seen in terms of demand and supply, but using that information to inform the business case. So really thinking about the achievability of cost profiles and forecasts, and it gives that a bit of credence and a bit of thing. Well, actually, we've done it before in this way, so therefore, it gives a bit of comfort. So it's another tool that can be used to be thinking about our forecasting and ability to spend money. And then the final point there on the slide is just sort of about things that might be novel and contentious. Again, and maybe some of the things that you're doing, may be deemed as a bit more sort of showing innovation and could be deemed sort of novel and contentious. It's really key to make sure, we're really clear on these things, and then obviously the conversations have happened with MCHLG to make sure that any approval that's needed and making sure all the right things are in place for your business case, just to make sure that you don't get too far down the line and this is actually, hang on a minute, we're not able to proceed with this. So it's really sort of thinking that one through and just making sure that you can sort of ask that question yourself, that does this really make sense? Thank you. And then I think I'm going to pass over to Fiona to talk through the next few slides.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Karen. So moving on to benefit cost ratios, which it's always worthwhile remembering that every pound of the Towns Fund or Levelling Up Fund money is taxpayers' money, so it needs to be good value for money, which is obviously determined by your benefit cost ratio, which we know is developed at the outset of your business case cycle, but it's worth bearing in mind that your BCR is not a static construct, and particularly in what we're seeing just now is quite a volatile and inflationary environment, that the BCR is likely to be updated perhaps throughout the business case cycle also throughout the project as a whole. We do know that in the PAR process, it's a requirement to update your BCR, and that's where we usually see the BCR being updated. So that's where we're being pragmatic with our approach in BCR updates, and limits the risk of your BCR becoming outdated. However, Karen has spoken about the importance of measuring your benefits and costs, but those also need to be measured throughout the business case cycle and throughout the life of the project. So then monitoring the level of your benefits and costs will help provide an indicator of whether your BCR might be coming outdated. We do know that often the BCRs are outsourced for updating, so that's the lens of monitoring your benefits and costs will help provide an indicator of where your BCR might be coming outdated. And then if we move on to the finance case, and what we'll look at, first of all, is some of the differences between the finance and economic case. I guess this serves as a bit of a refresher, perhaps, but actually, sometimes what we do see is some of the common pitfalls of the finance case is not quite recognising those differences between the finance and economic case. So where we are developing the finance case, what we're focusing on is the affordability and the cash flow of the scheme. Is it financially viable? So your cash flows are not discounted in your finance case. We're looking to see how much the scheme will cost in real terms in each year of the scheme, and not today's value as we'd look at in the economic case. As such, we need to apply inflation to your costs, which is obviously key to affordability, again, particularly in today's environment, and particularly with what we're seeing in construction costs as well, having quite high inflation. Budgetary and accounting costs will come on to, as well as which need to be included within the financial case, alongside distinction between your capital and your resource costs as well. Irrecoverable VAT should be included in your financial case, and I'm conscious that it's not always finance SMEs who are writing the finance case, so it's worthwhile being really clear with either those who might be outsourcing some of the cost calculations to, or your finance teams, that irrecoverable VAT does need to be included in case. The case, I've seen it sometimes where there's a surprise 20% added to costs, which can really impact the affordability of the case. Karen's spoken about the coverage of societal benefits being included in the economic case. In the finance case, we're looking at affordability for your organisation or the funding organisations, and your economic costs or opportunity costs aren't considered within your financial case. So if we come on to some of the common pitfalls that we see, firstly being the clarity of your funding requirement, that often, I think particularly as a business case reviewer, sometimes when you pick up a case, it can be slightly difficult to decipher exactly what the financial ask is, and is the is a scheme considered to be affordable. So an easy, good practice tip for that is to include a very clear and simple table setting out the funding ask, and that would be split by financial year, it would be split by your budget type, and have that upfront in your exec summary, but you'd also have perhaps your more detailed version within your financial case as well. Make it really clear what you're asking for in terms of the financial ask. In terms of the funding ask being transparent, make sure that you're really upfront with your assumptions in the model as well. That might include inflation. It might include some key inputs in terms of what cost per square metre are you looking at for the fit out of a building, or as Karen said, it might be how many users are you expecting at your new leisure centre that you're building? Again, key to clarity of the funding requirement is the scheme as a whole might not be funded by Towns Fund or Levelling Up Fund money. So actually where there are other sources, make sure you do include those and make it transparent how you're planning to fund that scheme as a whole, and also including what your level of confidence is in that funding. Is it certain, or are there some uncertainties over your confidence of other sources of funding as well? The next common pitfall would be incorrect budget type, making sure that you get that resource and capital split right so that it's appropriate for your case and you're able to spend the money on the right things. Quite simply, liaise with your finance team on that. If you're uncertain, they should be the experts in what budget type is correct. So it's crucial that you get that right in the case. As I'd mentioned, one thing that isn't included in the economic case but is included in the financial case is the impact on your accounts and on the balance sheet of the authority. Often the schemes that we see include asset investments or disposals, which will often include assets coming onto or coming off of your balance sheet, and might have that would have implications in the accounts, but then there's also other implications such as depreciation, an accounting construct for the change in valuation of that building. So really where there's a purchase or leases of assets, then that's a flag for you to speak to the finance team and make sure that any accounting implications are also included in the financial case as well. In general, it's good practice to make sure that you are having the finance team review the financial case as well. You might have a couple of indicators such as asset purchases and disposals that might identify where there could be an accounts or balance sheet impact, but your finance team might be able to look for some more nuanced indicators as well, because it's not always obvious. The final piece here is on appropriate update of the financial case, and just as Karen had mentioned that changes to one case need to be flowed through the entire case, and that each of the five cases need to have that golden thread looped through them. The financial case is really crucial in that aspect, and what we can see sometimes is that changes to assumptions in other cases, or changes to your preferred option, perhaps late in the day, changes aren't flowed through to your financial case. So throughout the business case cycle, but also perhaps is that one of the last things you do before submitting is making sure that all of those assumptions are correct and reflected within your financial case. As you move through the business case cycle as well, we know that your ranges of financial costs, sources and assumptions might need to be revisited and refreshed. Your optimism bias or residual risk costs, have those been updated in your financial case? Sometimes those can be missed out as well. And then other common factors to consider are your procurement costs, which might become clearer as you move through the business case cycle. Any borrowing costs and also any monitoring and evaluation costs are commonly costs that we might see missed out of the financial case. So make sure that you've considered all appropriate costs in your financial case. And then coming to the end of the presentation part of the webinar, touching on project adjustment requests, which we spoke about in considering the BCR. But as you may be aware, the department has delegated some decision making on powers to the town deal boards and local authorities. so any modified spend, outputs and outcomes by up to 30% don't require formal clearance from the department, but it's worthwhile being really clear that changes that do require a PAR aren't just changes in cost, and that actually it's a wider scope of changes where you rescoped your outputs or outcomes, change in location, for example. There's listed on the screen, and there's some really helpful resources from the team as well, which gives some more detail on exactly where the PAR is required. But it is key to note that your PAR approval should be required ahead of proceeding with any changes that are proposed. And then these slides will be circulated, so we have access to the links that we've included within this slide, but there is a wealth of resources on developing the business case as a whole, but also your economic and financial cases. On the right-hand side is the Towns Fund business case resources, which would be my starting place as those are most specific to what you are looking at. But the HMT Green Book is really the base source of information on business case production. There's a wealth of information in there that will often answer more nuanced questions. And the document in the middle, the HMT checklist for business case assessment, is often used by business case reviewers, and I find is a really helpful checklist to ask, have I included everything appropriately at each stage of the business case cycle.